Imani, welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited to finally have you here.
Thank you. I'm excited as well. Thank you so much for having me.
For our listeners, Imani and I, we knew of each other, as often goes in the industry. We met in person. We traveled to Doha together last February, I think, and
Yeah.
immediately connected. Imani is such a lovely person. So I'm very excited to have you on the show today. Your story for the cut, life as a Black digital nomad isn't the same, is a really powerful story. And we're going to link to it in the show notes so the listeners can check it out. And it examines so many themes, such as who gets to enjoy the freedom and flexibility of being a digital nomad, how racism shows up in corporate America, and how Black women specifically are treated in the workplace, and so much more. I thought it was very poignant how you said in the piece, many people see working abroad as a privilege. For me, it's a way of escaping deadly racism in the US. Tell us more about this piece and kind of what prompted you to write it.
Yeah, I remember I was asked by the editor to write about it. I think she had seen like some of the tweets that I had on Twitter about just the differences of what it's like being a digital nomad or being considered an expat when you're from a marginalized community. And one of the things that I talked about, because this was during the time of like COVID, and then also there was a lot of racialized unrest and social justice movements happening in the United States simultaneously. And it just drew in a bigger conversation as to why a lot of Black people and other marginalized groups were leaving the United States and expatriating outside of the United States. And for me, as someone who has a constancy of threat, no matter where it is that they go, meeting, various intersections, being Black, being Muslim, being a woman, there's not so much of like the ease of just going wherever you want to go, not really having any thought about it, getting to just enjoy, and really having to focus on even the marginalized groups in the places that we go. And so for me, it was really just talking about it from the lens of, especially with social media and the amount of digital nomads that erupted during COVID. It was like people aren't even traveling responsibly. People aren't even getting COVID tests to ensure that they're not negatively impacting communities where they go. And so it was really just a piece to really talk about the culmination of all of these experiences of what it's like, being a Black person in the world, evading the violence that happens in my home country, but also just the threat of what it looks like even being abroad, and having to always be cognizant of the communities in which I'm engaging myself when I'm abroad.
Yeah, there's so many layers into that decision making that you kind of go through, right? So on that, how do you choose? Let's say you decided to pick up and leave. How do you choose, or how do you think about, okay, where should I go? Where would I feel comfortable? Where would I feel safe?
When I originally moved abroad, I left in 2015, and it was very similar. Sandra Bland was murdered, and her and I were the same age at the time. And when I learned more about her story, she was, a Black woman, like chasing her dream. I think she had just like either interviewed for like her dream position or had just been offered the role or something. She was on her way home, and just one traffic, stop, police stopped her, and she doesn't go home to her family. Right. And I remember thinking about that whole summer. And I remember planning my move abroad in like 1 month. I had no experience. I never lived abroad before, and I was just like, I have to try something different. I have to do something different. And so originally it was really, it felt like a means to an end. Like, I just need to find something different. I need to do something different because I just felt like my life in the US, it just wasn't working for me. It just didn't feel like I was making my way in my industry as a media professional. I didn't feel like people were offering the opportunities that I felt like I was qualified for. And then at the same time, I was tired of constantly feeling like I'm marching, I'm fighting, I'm voicing about things that are happening to people. And I left out of that. I left out of frustration. I left out of I can't afford to make ends meet, even though I have a degree, even though I have all these credentials. And then every year after that, it was really just a matter of exploration and just like, hey, I have this opportunity to go to this place. Let's see what it's like. Let's see what the people are like. And it just became more so an exploration factor than anything else.
Yeah, I love that. And in that time, you've lived actually in several different places. You've lived in Egypt, Poland. You gave birth to your son in Poland, which is a story I absolutely love. You lived in China, you lived in Malaysia and Mexico. Any of those have kind of strike you particularly as a place that really spoke to you or that you enjoyed the most?
I feel like everywhere has a special place for me. Like Egypt was the first place that I ever lived abroad, ever. And like prior to me moving to Egypt, I had only traveled abroad one time. And so
Wow.
this was like my only second experience of actually traveling abroad, and it was to move abroad. And, I was teaching literature, and so I got a chance to really like, talk to teenagers. I was teaching high school. I was teaching 11th graders, and they helped me learn the language. They helped me navigate the culture and what it was like and how to really get around. And Egypt was the first place I got a chance to challenge myself. Like I would just go outside and try to hail a taxi and see what would happen, right? My students would teach me my numbers in Arabic, and then I would go and I would try it. I would go on the street, I would go to the souks, and I would just see like what worked. And I remember my first time like catching a taxi. I think I said to the guy like Hamza, and I held up the number 5. And you know, in Arabic, it's more of the inflection of that call. And he just drove off like, lady, what are you talking about? And I ended up having to walk to where it is that I needed to go. But Egypt was it has a special place in my heart because it taught me a certain grit that I needed to have abroad. It taught me a certain like know-how of being present, of learning the language, of ingratiating myself into a culture. And then, you know, everywhere else has always been special for a different reason. Poland is where I gave birth to my son, right? Poland is in Europe, and people are like, you're a Black person, you're Muslim, and you went to Poland to give birth. And it's like, yeah. And the people were so lovely, and they were so kind and so warm, and they loved on us, and they doted on my son. And that experience was so magical in and of itself. So it's like every place for me has had something special about it that, you know, when you're a traveler, there's always something that when you go somewhere, it's just a magic that happens that you really can't express or describe unless someone else, you know, can really understand. Mexico was where my son started school. It was his first, well, actually second, because when we were in China, he started speaking Mandarin, but then COVID happened. And obviously, you know, I don't know much Mandarin to, you know, allow him to keep up the language. So Mexico was his second opportunity to really learn a language. But now he's fluent. So he has fluency in Spanish. So it was our first place that as a child, he was able to build community and go to school and have friends. And so that's also special in that way as well.
Your son must be such a global citizen. I absolutely adore that. Like that's a dream of mine that if and when I ever have kids, I want them to have that experience, you know, from the beginning, because I just think that the way it opens up a person's mind is just so incredible.
Yeah. It's interesting because so my son had his passport at 6 weeks old. And, you know, I remember seeing all these articles and things about like, and obviously social media, like, what's the purpose of traveling with your kid when they're not going to remember? And for me, the biggest takeaway is like, but you're going to remember. I remember going to Portugal with my son while he was in a pram. I remember being in Spain with my son in a pram, in Greece with my son in the pram, and trying to go into the you know, pyramids with my son, you know, as a baby, and breastfeeding on the side of the pyramid. You know what I mean? And it's like, no, he's not going to remember it, but I have pictures and I have memories, and these are things that I get a chance to cherish. Now that he's older, we get an opportunity to do travel in a different way where he can remember, where he can also give his input as to what he likes and what he doesn't like. And one of the things that he did not like, we went to Egypt 2 years ago, and I got a buggy, a horse buggy, and you know how they have to whack the side of the wagon. They're not hitting the horse, but they're whacking the wagon, and he thought they were hitting the horse. And even though I already paid the man the money to get us around the pyramids, because, you know, they're very hilly. It's a lot if you're
Yeah.
out in the sun. My son was like, no, mommy, I want to get down. I want to get off. And so now we get to do travel in a different way where he gets to incorporate his own passions and his own likes and his own dislikes and be able to contribute to the trip in that way as well. So I think every single stage for these kids is so beautiful. And I also think it makes them who they are. Now they're called third culture kids these days. But I think that
Yes.
makes them who it is that they are, experiencing languages at an early age, experiencing different cultures. And I think that's the world that we ultimately want them to live in.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I also think that even though maybe consciously they don't remember those first couple of years or whatever, but subconsciously they are absorbing all those languages, foods, smells, environments. So maybe our science hasn't caught up yet to what it actually
Yeah.
does to a person at that age, you know? So that's super cool. But I wonder, of course, it sounds really interesting and it sounds like you had an amazing experience. But also I must think that it was also difficult at times, right? To navigate all of that with small baby. I don't know how much support you had at that point, but you know, talk a little bit about the difficulties too of doing that.
Oh yeah, it's definitely painstaking when you don't necessarily have like close-knit family, aunties, uncles, parents, siblings, and you're trying to find community, but also, you know, the safety aspect and the trust. And it's like, you know, you're coming from the United States where we have like kidnappings and things of that nature. So those things are always in your mind.
Yeah.
Whereas other cultures, that's not necessarily something that's very prevalent. You know, most places around the world, you have nanny culture, you have housekeepers. Those things are celebrated. Those things are second nature to everyone. And so that took some getting used to as well. In my Americanized mind is like, oh, as a mom, you just have to do everything and you have to be, you know, everywhere and everyone for your kid. And it's like, no, you can actually hire a nanny or you can hire a housekeeper. You can hire a babysitter or whatever is necessary to help you,
And
you know,
there's
divvy out
nothing wrong
tasks.
with that, right? There's nothing
Nothing.
wrong with that.
It's probably the best money you'll ever spend, to be honest with you. It helps so much. I remember our first 90 days, and I think anyone who's ever lived in China can probably attest to the same thing. It's like that first 90 days, that learning curve, you know, if you don't speak Mandarin, and the technology in China at that time, it was light years ahead of the US. So everything was on your phone. Everything was through WeChat. I remember being in rural airports where there's no signs in English except for the restroom, right? And so you're having to navigate a whole different culture, a whole different language. And obviously Mandarin is made in script. It's not made in like phonetics. I can't try and sound it out and try to make out what this could possibly be. It's script, you know, it's drawn and it's calligraphy, right? And so it's like, oh my goodness. And I remember just trying to figure out how to get the internet on, and then also doing the mom thing and finding places to take my son because he's not old enough to be in school, trying to find places that I can work that have Wi-Fi. But then in order to connect to the Wi-Fi, you have to have a Chinese phone number and just all these types of nuances. First world problems, obviously, but the frustrations of someone who's a fish out of water. I'm so brand new to this place and I have a baby and I just want to be okay. Thankfully, what I will say is that there are so many expat groups. People are available and make themselves available to you that say, oh, hey, I've been here for like 2 years. Here's some shortcuts. Here's some things and here's some ways. And once that 90-day like kind of subsided and I started to meet other people, university students, teachers, other folks who had been living there for a while and was like, don't worry, like, I can help you do this. If you need to know how to get here, if you have any questions, that made it a little bit easier. But yeah, it does have its moments where it's like you feel like you're the only one in the world. You feel like such a fish out of water. You feel like the foreigner, right? Whereas like in the US, you're not. You're American and you belong. And I think, you know, having these experiences, it gave me a greater love for people who immigrate to the United States, for people who don't speak the language, for people who are navigating such tumultuous circumstances, because people are forcing Americanisms onto folks who are like, I just got here. I'm just trying to learn. I'm just trying to, find a job. I'm just trying to find safety. I'm just trying to find shelter. It gave me such a greater love because I got a chance to experience it on many levels in many countries. And that also lessened the frustration because I'm like, well, now you have this opportunity to go and find ways to learn the language and communicate to the people and learn how to navigate amongst someone else's culture that's outside of your own. In its frustration, it also really grew me as a human being and as a person to have a whole different level of empathy.
And we feel that, Imani. I felt that immediately when I met you, and I definitely felt that, and I couldn't agree more. I think that's an experience that just opens you up to the world. And when you were talking about that, I had flashes of arriving to the US at 16. Because that's exactly it. You're just going through and you're so disoriented. For a lot of people, unfortunately, it's also that you are arriving because you're fleeing from something really bad. So it's just a whole other layer of things that you have to deal with when you're coming here. And so, yeah, that empathy that you speak of, I wish more people in our society had that. I feel like we would just be in such a better place. I want to congratulate you on starting a new position as a director of communications at Beam, an organization that deals with Black emotional and mental health. In fact, it stands for Black Emotional and Mental Health Collective. You've been a freelancer for so long, just like I have. And when I saw your announcement that you're now a director of communications there, I was like, yes. Tell me about that. Tell me about that. How does it feel?
Yeah, thank you. It feels amazing because ultimately where I am in my career and in my life, I obviously, and I've always been this way in my career, but just in a different way now of doing work that's really impactful and purposeful and things that align with my true values. I feel like even in times where I've been like a staff writer or a staff editor, I haven't been able to tell the stories that I've wanted to tell, or, I haven't been able to really like spread my wings in showing up as my whole self, right? Like I can be Imani, but to an extent, not necessarily as audacious as I am in real life. And holistically, Being allows me that opportunity to really speak truth to power. Because as a Black person, I strongly believe in having the resources that's necessary for marginalized and intersectional communities to be able to have mental health resources, wellness resources, and in addition to those, economic resources like actual money. And the organization really prides itself on fostering a communal environment that says we're here for you, and not just in word and not just in social media, but actually in action and what it is that we do. And even within the organization, allowing people to take mental health days and to, not have a 5-day work week. We have a 4-day work week, which allows us Friday, Saturday, and Sunday to decompress and to focus on family and fun and whatever it is that we choose. So yeah, I was very intentional this time and this stage in my career to really go after roles that I really believe in and that impact people in a positive way. And then in addition to that, something that can impact me in a positive way and allows me to continuously just, like I said, fulfill the purpose that I feel like I'm here to do as a storyteller. And in addition to that, that impacts the collective community, especially marginalized people, in a very positive and unique way. And Beam really allows me to do that.
Yeah, I love that so much. I hear so much intention behind your words, and that really speaks to me too. And again, we connected on that as well, because I think both you and I have been really frustrated with our industry for a while now. Not only because how volatile it is and how little paid the industry is, but also because it does not allow us to show up as our full selves, like you said. And by the way, for our listeners who are listening this as a podcast rather than as a video interview that you can find on YouTube, Imani is wearing a gorgeous, gorgeous kufiya as a headscarf, and it's really beautiful. You definitely have to go to YouTube to check it out.
Thank you.
But that's the other thing that I think you and I connected last year, was how our industry is handling, or rather failing to handle, the genocide in Gaza. Because we are always tooting our horn, we as a collectively, as the travel industry, of being these, very aware people, very globally minded people, very humanity oriented people. But then when it comes to this horrible, horrible genocide and the ongoing apartheid in Palestine, we're saying nothing. And that just really broke my heart and made me feel so disenamored, I would say, with the industry. And you and I shared these frustrations in DMs. In fact, Imani was one of very few people who said yes to supporting the Travel Industry for Palestine petition that I started. And you guys can actually find it at travelindustryforpalestine.org. You can sign it. You can make your voice heard. We have a letter there that we authored, and there's a lot of resources there as well. But let's talk about that a little bit, because when you come on to the chat today, I was like, oh my god, I love what you're wearing. It's so beautiful.
It's so important, and it's so important to see my peers. The fact that you and I were both as fiery and as passionate about our industry in and of itself. Like, we love travel holistically because we love people. We're humanists. We love people. We love culture, and we love being able to tell the stories of those people and how they impact the world and how we influence each other and how we're so culturally connected. And so I love the fact that, like, I was like, finally, someone else who understands, like, the impact that we have as storytellers and how we could really move the needle. And it's not really a matter of taking this political stance. It's just taking a human stance, that this is happening to humans in real time. And this can happen to anyone, anywhere in real time. And I think that that's the focal point. And connecting with you really helped me to kind of quell some of the frustration that I had, because I'm like, does anybody see this? Does anybody hear or see or is watching what's going on? Is everyone going to hide as though this is not happening? Are we just going to skate around this and just have articles about the buzziest hotels in this destination and the best place to get whatever that doesn't matter really in the world? Especially the editorial industry has made this shift into being trendy focused, and what's on trend and what's being TikToked and what's SEO, what are people searching for, and understanding that has its place, because that's how they are able to generate an income, and maybe their ad dollars focus on that. But I also feel that humanitarianism in and of itself is a part of what we do as travelers. We can't be travelers and say we don't care about people, right? Because we're going into other people's homes. We're going into other people's communities. Whether we're staying at a hotel or not, we're still somewhere that people worship and pray, where people eat, where people go to school. And I think that that's what people leave out. And I've said this quote a million times. I think the first time I said it was at the Women's Travel Fest. This was in 2020, 2019. And I said, the destination is not about the destination. The destination is about the people. And if we forget about the people in the process of talking about these destinations, what are we doing? Who are we, right? As storytellers and as people that say that we advocate for what's happening within the travel sector. So I'm extremely thankful for you for coming up with us being aligned with Palestine. For me, I also talk about what's going on in the DRC, in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, because a lot of what it is that we do as people, in terms of how we use our devices, our laptops, our phones, whatever, those things are being pillaged from innocent people in the Democratic Republic of Congo. People are being displaced as a result of that. Sudan is another area of the world that is going through a crisis. It doesn't take much for us to just say something, to say we see you, we hear you, and even highlight grassroots organizations that are doing the work, to say, hey, let's write an article about how it is that we can support displaced people in Palestine, in the Congo, in Sudan. But those are the things that they just completely stay away from, because you'll find that a CEO somewhere is like, that's completely off the table. We're not discussing that. We're not talking about that. And it does leave a bit of a sour taste in your mouth, because we should be better than this as an industry, but we're really still under this capitalistic structure of just focusing on money.
I signed my name under everything you just said. Wholeheartedly. And, you know, for me, it's, or you actually said that. And I think that that is such a powerful thing to realize how connected everything is. When in the middle of this crisis in Philistine, I love how you said Philistine also. In the middle of this crisis, I think it was November or December maybe, I get an email, a press release or a press email from some PR agency saying, Yulia, would you like to write about the honorable FBI directors and police officers who are going to Israel to train the Israeli army in its effort to combat Hamas in Gaza? And I was like, you have to be kidding me, right? That, first of all, that this PR agency would even like consider sending something like that to me. Like, have they done their research? Do they know who I am? But how connected it? And it's a widely known fact that there is cross-training between U.S. Military and police force and the Israeli military. They train each other. They share latest tools and technology on how to oppress people. I mean, it's an incredibly interconnected topic, not even mentioning the fact that our tax dollars are going there to support it, right? It's just mind-boggling how connected these struggles are. It feels like the industry is really doing lip service, because we do say about our values and our humanity and how focused we are on humans when we travel. But at the end of the day, it feels like just lip service, because when you're ignoring a topic like that, it just doesn't make any sense.
One of my biggest insights to that before October 7th was Hawaii. People are saying, hey, please don't come here. We're having a water crisis. Our homelessness skyrocketed as a result of all of these resorts and over tourism. Please don't come here. And I remember, because, you know, I'm going to say names. I remember Point Sky did this contest to potentially win a trip to Hawaii. And then I was seeing travel influencers going there. Nobody's talking about the fact that the people in the place are battling between the resorts using the water and them being able to have water for day-to-day usage. And I'm just like, this is like the most dystopic moment in time, because people are literally saying, please, they're pleading with us. We don't necessarily have to get on this airplane. I don't know anybody that lives so close to Hawaii that is just like, well, I just had to come because I can just drive over there. Everyone has to get on an airplane to do this, and everyone has to be very intentional with making their travels to go there. And so for me, when after October 7th happened, I was like, they're just going to continue to do the same things, because a lot of travel influencers were in Israel for press trips prior to this. And we're talking about an occupation that's been happening for 76 years, not just October 7th, right? And so when we think about that, and we think about the press trips that, you know, people take in these certain places that are openly oppressing folks, openly like just, you know, doing this, is just like, wow, we really have lost our humanity. And then we don't even bother to say, okay, I'm going to go to these places, but I'm going to speak on it in some way and just share this information with my audience. We just sweep it under the rug. We're going to take some really pretty Instagrammable pictures, and everybody goes home.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's so important what you just said, because it's also, I would say it's also not clear cut to me, at least sometimes, because, for example, I just went to Hong Kong. I just took a press trip to Hong Kong. And Hong Kong is undergoing a very interesting time right now, where it's been kind of swallowed into the Chinese government and the Chinese system. And so you could say that, well, should you have taken that Hong Kong trip as well? It's ultimately a Chinese government that's supporting this trip, right? And so for me, it's like, well, which country is safe to go to if you take that approach too, right? Because at the end of the day, almost every government, not every, but a lot of governments around the world are oppressing somebody, right?
Yes.
So how many governments then, or how many countries do you have left where you can go and feel good about being there on a, specifically on a press trip, right? We're not talking simply traveling. We're talking
Right.
specifically taking a press trip, which is usually government supported, right? But for me, I take that second stance, which is what you said. You go there, okay, you're there on this trip, which is organized by the government, but you talk openly about what you saw there. And so, for example, one of the things that I saw in Hong Kong right now was that a lot of people refuse to speak on the record with me about what's been happening in Hong Kong in the past few years. And I'm not going to name names because I don't want to jeopardize their safety. But several people that I spoke with and I was asking them questions, they're like, Yulia, this is all off the record. And some of them would even not give me their names because they were. And so that is happening. Yes, Hong Kong is fabulous. Yes, it's an incredible place, but this is also happening. And to your point, we cannot sweep this under the rug and pretend that everything is rosy everywhere, because it's not. And I think in 2024, we cannot do that.
Yeah.
There's too much open information and open access to things for us to continue sweeping things under the rug.
Absolutely. And I think to your point, you go somewhere like Hong Kong and China, you understand that there's certain places that you cannot just openly spew your views, right? I learned that in my first year of being in Egypt, where taxi drivers and other people were like, oh, you're so lucky that you could openly speak out against your government. Like, we could never do that here, right? And so in understanding that, right, because you and I are people who talk to people, we talk to local people because they matter in those places, we understand our privileges, right? And I understand that my privilege as an American, as someone who, I'm going to put air quotes, has freedom of speech and certain quote unquote freedoms, that I can flex a little bit of what those freedoms look like to be able to speak on behalf of those who can't speak. And so I would never, like you said, I would never want anyone to put themselves in harm's way, or me or you put someone else in harm's way just simply to get the word out, or just simply to blast a government entity or whatever the case may be. But if we can give people information that alludes to have them understand, like, hey, these are some things that are happening that you should be keen on, that you should be mindful of. For me, even for the folks that do decide to go to Hawaii, how about you shop with local vendors? Make sure that you support the local communities. Make sure that you find a local mom and pop shop, a local restaurant, a local driver that you can put money and help them to support their families. Because we obviously know tourism is not going anywhere. People are not going to stop flying. People are not going to stop going the places that they want to go. But at the very least, we can do so responsibly and just have people in mind.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. I love that so much, Imani. I just realized that for all the difficulties and all the challenging things that keep happening in the world, I also feel like there's been a lot of progress, even if we just look at the awareness level. And the fact that you and I are sitting here and talking about all these issues, which maybe 5 years ago we wouldn't have. I think that in itself is a huge step. And when you came on the chat today and I saw you wearing the kufia, I told you, oh my gosh, my kufia is in the suburbs. I don't have one with me. So I was like, what can I bring to this conversation to honor and to represent Palestine? And I found the postcard that I got in Jordan. If you go to YouTube, you will see what I'm showing here. But it's a Palestinian astronaut in space. And I think that just such a beautiful vision of what could be when people like that who are oppressed around the world can go and pursue whatever the heck they want to pursue, and to have that right for self-determination. Basically, this is what we're talking about here, you know. So I don't have a kufia, but I do have my postcard here that I really love. So let's talk a little bit about being Muslim and being Black Muslim in America. In one of your articles that we're also going to link to, I think it was published on the Grio, you mentioned how the concept of Islam in America began with Black people. Say more about that.
A lot of people are often surprised, and I've done these videos on Instagram and TikTok, and people are like, I had no idea, people who were considered black and Muslim were coming into the Americas like 1500s. They were coming as sailors, as explorers, and eventually, obviously, we have the transatlantic slave trade. And a good percentage of the people who were, wrongfully enslaved during that time were Muslim people. And so we have examples like Omar ibn Said, who was a slave who actually wrote his autobiography in Arabic, right? And then we have some examples in Sapelo Square, in Sapelo Islands in Georgia, where we have the Balali family. They remark on how their ancestor, he would wear a fez often. He had a prayer rug, and they also participated in Ramadan. They would eat rice cakes, and they would have certain meals in certain times of the year. And so we have small evidences that they have attempted to try to keep their faith and keep their names and keep their traditions. Now, obviously, we know that there were forced conversions, but my family is multi-generational Muslim on my paternal side, now also on my mother's side, but kind of predates my mother's side a bit. And so, yeah, it's always a passion of mine to explore that history for people, because terrorism and 9/11 and these things happen, and all of a sudden it was like, oh, Muslims exist. And it's like, well, we've been here. We've been on the continent of the United States and in the Americas. We have examples of Black considered Muslim people in South America, in the Caribbean. It's, my work to really explore that and to really educate people that no, like we have existed, since the beginning of time, but also that we have been on this side of the world and practicing and keeping our faith and keeping our language. My paternal grandfather and grandmother actually went to court so that we could keep our name, because they were considered Negro, but they had these Arab names. And so they actually had to go to court in the United States of America. They had a Jewish attorney who fought for them for me to have the last name Bashir. So I get to keep my name. I get to keep my legacy and my lineage, which is something that is very special, especially as racialized as we are, and as a people, how we were forced to change our names and our languages and just our overall culture. It's like that's something special that I can keep with me, because that is my lineage and that is my culture. And it's something that I often find like people are very marveled at, like, oh my goodness, I never knew this. And they actually have in the African American History Museum in Washington, D.C., they have like some vicar beads. They have some examples of like writings. They have, I believe, the Quran that Thomas Jefferson, I guess, had at the White House. So they have some examples of artifacts that are examples of Black Muslims, being in this land and on this soil for a very long time.
It reminds me of how important representation is, and speaking and awareness, because it's not in the mainstream ethos at all. So when you show up on Instagram, on TikTok, by the way, everybody should follow Imani on Instagram and on TikTok, because she does really great and very informative videos on a consistent basis, and we're gonna link to her handle in the show notes as well. But the handle is
at She Is Imani B.
But it's so important, right? That representation and that awareness is so important. And I also think that there are so many misconceptions about Islam. In my personal experience with Islam, and mine comes mostly from Jordan, as the listeners of this podcast will know, I love Jordan. I have many friends there. Every touch point I've ever had with Islam, I've always marveled at how beautiful it is. And I also loved your words about it, where you said, saying that I'm a Muslim is a verb and it requires doing. So how do you understand that?
So for me, Islam is laid out, right? Most people know, like, Islam has the 5 pillars, right? And so in those 5 pillars, you have the daily prayers, you have the fasting during Ramadan, you have all of these things that it says to do, right? And so for me, a verb is action. So if I have to pray, and if I have to fast, and if I have to give charity, and if I have to be kind to my neighbor, and if I have to, then if I say that I'm a Muslim, then that is a verb. These are things that I have to do. I can't just like be a Muslim monk and just like sit in a room and just say, hey, I'm Muslim. No, we're given these guidelines and this structure of things to actually do in the world. And then it was often reported that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam had said that if you see something, right, that is happening, a harm that is happening, an injustice that is happening, the person that has the strongest of faith is the person that actively goes to do something about it. The first person who has the weakest level of faith, they may see it and they may despise it, but they just feel something in their heart, right? And so for me, that's a powerful lesson of like action and being active in your deen, in your faith, and walking in this purpose. And so for me, when I wear a kufiya and when I, and when I speak about these things, it's as a result of the Islam and my interpretation of what it is to be a Muslim and to be active and to really ingratiate community. We have a word that says ummah. Ummah means community. And we don't just mean that the ummah is all Muslim people everywhere. No, that's not the example that we have of the prophet that we hold extremely dear to us. He had Jewish neighbor, he had Christian neighbor, he had atheist neighbor, and he had ways in which he treated all of those people, and all of those people were treated with kindness, and all of those people were treated with dignity. And so for me, in that example, it shows me that these are the things that I must do if I say that I am a Muslim. So that's just my personal interpretation of the practice, but I strongly believe that in order to say that you are Muslim, it's about what it is that you do, not just who it is that you say that you are.
That is so beautiful. And it sounds like like you said, it's a very active and activism focused even
yes
faith, and your point about community, this is the reason why I keep coming back to Jordan. Because I feel that warmth, I feel, and not everybody, I would say actually probably most of my friends in Jordan are not religious, they're not necessarily followers of Islam to the T, but they have grown up in this culture, right? And they have these beliefs innate to them. And I feel that warmth, I feel that community. And by the way, yes, Jordan has also been for ages many different communities, and to this day one of my friends is Armenian, the other of my friends is a Lebanese Christian, right? Another one is Muslim. So it pains me to see how much that has been twisted in the West, the religious war of Islam against Christianity, how twisted it has become, that is the first thing that people think, like they have fear in their hearts when they hear about somebody being Muslim, where from my personal experience, when I hear somebody being Muslim, I want to hug them, which is just so wild that it gets so twisted.
Yeah, I think that that's the propaganda, right? There's a lot of structures that are purposely put in place to make us all feel that we're so vastly different. Yeah. And so it allows oppression to happen in that way. Oppression really feeds off of this concept that we're so different. You and I love chai. We love us a good cup of chai, and we're from two totally different areas of the world, right? But if we never get a chance to actually sit down and have a conversation, and we ever get to sit down and say, oh, well, I would like a cup of chai. Oh, you like chai? I like chai as well, right? Then we always have this preconceived notion of someone else that says, oh, maybe she doesn't like anything ethnic because she's white, or maybe she doesn't like anything cultural because she's black, right? And so for me, it's all important for us to really understand like the crux of just who people are versus belief systems, but also belief systems and how it makes people who they are and how it makes people walk into the world versus just what is used to demonize people. Because ultimately, there are good people and there are bad people, no matter what you believe. And so if we can identify that very thing, then we can meet people on a very just human level, one-to-one, and just get a chance to know each other naturally.
Oh, Imani, it's like we're both speaking the same language, you and I. I love hearing that so much. By the way, the backstory to Imani mentioning chai is that we bonded over different things in Doha, but one of the things we discovered there is that we both really loved the chai that they were serving in one of the coffee shops there. And so we would sneak away and we would go have our chai sessions there. It was so good.
It was so
it,
delicious.
it's, it makes me wonder what you said. It makes me wonder, how do people, individuals, break down those barriers that sometimes feel so powerful, right? You mentioned propaganda, you mentioned stereotypes, you mentioned government actions, and all those things are heightened right now, particularly with respect to Palestine, but also other regions as well. So for me, at least, sometimes it feels so discouraging. I see so many good people out there, but sometimes it feels like those other forces are much more powerful. So I guess my question to you is, how do you think about that? How do we as individuals break down those barriers? I know it's a big question, but
I think ultimately you have to start with not grouping people, right? It's just when you group people as an all versus like a sum or a specific sector of those people. When you say all Muslims believe, that's never going to be factual, right? Because all people anywhere don't believe one way, don't have one ideology of anything, right? So I think it's ultimately one, like allowing ourselves to not group people as an all, but individualize people or group them based on where it makes sense. Like this specific military, this specific government, this specific, thing. And then also I think it's a matter of putting yourself in positions to be within and amongst neighborhoods that are outside of your own. You don't learn about people. You don't know who people are and what they believe and what they like and what they dislike if you never get a chance to actually sit with those people. So unfortunately, we live in a society where we speak on behalf of folks and we don't allow them to speak and do the speaking for themselves. And so because other people are speaking over them, we're adopting these ideologies about people that are just not true. And I think it's a matter of also listening to the people that are being spoken on behalf of. Listen to those people. The people of Palestine have told us what it is that they need from us. We don't need the celebrity to tell us. We just need you to show that you have the awareness and say, hey, and point people to the people who are speaking. This is not my floor. This is not my, opportunity to take up space. This is my opportunity to highlight Bisan. This is my opportunity to highlight Motaz. This is my opportunity to highlight the people that need the floor to speak, to tell you who they are, to tell you what they're going through. And I'm just going to create the platform to help enhance you learning more about who those people are. And I think if we do that more, if we give more people the floor to tell us who they are and what they need, then all the preconceived notions, all the isms can go away, because it's like, oh, well, you graduated, I graduated. You like photography, I like photography. You have kids, I'm a mom, and you realize we can bridge a lot more gaps when we allow ourselves to listen and learn. And we also allow ourselves to give more of ourselves, to give people the opportunity to listen and learn from us as well.
I love that. I love that reminder to always bring it down to the individual level and remember that you have a person in front of you and not make those quick judgments, because we do make quick judgments, right? That's how we move through life. And a lot of times our brain is on autopilot because it's easier that way. But with respect to people, like meeting people in front of you, just remembering to try to avoid those quick judgments and see people for who they are. That's such a beautiful reminder. I wanted to ask you, so it's been 4 years since George Floyd. It's crazy that it's been 4 years. How do you feel about what has changed in America, or have things changed really, like meaningfully? Because there's, again, like been a lot of lip service, a lot of hot air been spoken by organizations and stuff. But how do you feel about that in the summer of 2024?
It's been a lot of lip service in terms of these things happen, right? Everyone goes into these social justice and yeah, we have to do this better and all of that, but it doesn't change. We see with, I don't know if you heard of a senior airman, his name was Roger Fortsman, and he was recently killed by police who pretty much were raiding his home, but they were at the wrong home. And they came to his door. They knocked on his door. He said, hello. He looks through the people. He doesn't see anyone. He goes back to his house doing what he does. Someone knocks on his door. He looks through the peephole again. He says, hello. He doesn't see anyone. No one answers. So at this stage, he's like, okay, I'm going to grab my concealed and licensed firearm in the event like something's going down, right? Because that is our Second Amendment right in the United States of America, okay? And so this senior airman, they bust into his house. They see he has this weapon, and I believe he was shot 6 times, and they were at the wrong home. And he was recently laid to rest. But these are stories that continuously happen. This is what happened to Breonna Taylor. This is the same thing. The wrong house. They raided the wrong home. And this woman who is asleep in her home was killed. And so I think that, we can say, post George Floyd, but we're really not beyond it. We're really not past it. We still have such a very structural problem with our police departments. We really have such a structural problem with the racism that is experienced. You can look through the research, and where it says that even young Black boys and young Black girls are often looked at as older than what it is that they are. So the innocence is taken away at a very, very early age. And these are things that I have to concentrate on because I'm raising a young Black boy. And so I often think about these things and where he just wants to have fun and go outside and play with a toy gun. And then I think of a kid like Tamir Rice, who was 12 years old, who was killed by police because they thought he actually had a real firearm. And so, yeah, like I said, I don't think we're really past a post-George Floyd era. I think we're getting a chance, especially now that we have social media and things are shared so rapidly, we get a chance to see things in real time as they're happening, to be able to make a change and to make a stance. And I just hope that ultimately the change is going to be the people, that the people understand that we're the ones who hold the power, that we're the ones who can really make decisions to say enough is far past enough. We are tired of this. We are tired of the oppression. We are tired of being treated like this. We are tired of being dehumanized. And we're going to come together, because ultimately coming together is what it's going to take for us to really, create power. And we're seeing that in small ways with Palestine and these encampments on the college. Shout out to all of these university students who have risked, expulsion, who have risked, the next stage of their careers, of their journeys, not being able to graduate, not being able to walk, because they understand the importance of, how it is that their privileges impacts the rest of the world. And I think that when we continuously show up like that in community, that's what creates change. And I hope that is something that happens much sooner. Now, obviously, it's going to take, a lot of time. But I hope that it continuously happens where we see each other as brothers and sisters, as community, as people who really want the same things. We really just want the same things. And from that starting place, we begin to build with each other and not demonize each other and not look past each other's harms.
Man, that is such a powerful place to stop, I think, Imani, and to end this particular conversation. I think that you, of all people, is such a beautiful reminder for all of us. Why is it so important to see others as individuals and as humans? And you give me hope. Knowing you and calling myself your friend gives me hope that not all is lost. And also what you said about the systems and how far we've come, but also how little progress we've made. And both of those are true. There is a podcast called Upstream, which I'm going to recommend to listeners who are interested in this topic more. Upstream is a podcast that looks at the systems that we live in, our systems of government, our systems of voting, and all of that, and how they work against making some of that social justice happen. But I want to close this conversation with these two questions. First, what are you most excited about in your life right now, and what gives you hope?
So I'm most excited about my new position. I've gotten a chance to really see the work that we do on the ground with helping Black communities and really helping to give resources to Black and marginalized and intersectional people. And that really is such a powerful thing. And what gives me hope is just the work that I continue to do, because I feel like sometimes not everyone is okay with being outspoken, and I'm okay with that, and I'm okay with what comes with that, whether it's criticisms and such. And so I'm hopeful that people are getting some morsel of information that they've never seen before, that they've never heard before, and hopefully it changed their minds and hearts in some way to do more in their own respective communities, right? Because charity always starts at home, but also in the communities that are really impacted the most. And so I'm really hopeful that whatever gems that people can take from me, that hopefully they're sharing with others, and there's a domino effect of information that's being spread, that's powerful, that's really going to positively impact the world.
I love that. I love that so much. Where are you going to next?
Ooh, that's a great question. Right now, I'm actually just looking to rest, let my son finish out the school year. I did have an opportunity to go to Hawaii. I have been praying over that because that's a place that I've really, in my personal politics, have stayed away from just out of respect of the people. But I'm wondering what positive work that I can do or what I can bring forward through via my social media or via my work that can really help people understand the gravity of the situation that people are facing there. So if given the opportunity, I'm looking forward to it, but also I'm treading very lightly and being very respectful of the people and figuring out ways that I can help really uplift them while I'm there.
We need more travelers like you, Imani, in the world.
And you.
Thank you so much, my friend. Thank you for coming today. It was such a beautiful conversation, and much love to you.
Love to you too. Thank you so much, Julia.